My next guest has written several books on Israel, and he spoke recently on a panel in Jerusalem warning of deteriorating ties between America and Israel. He asserts that both countries have had for a very long time an incentive to paper over their profound differences. But now he says things are changing. Quote, what we are now seeing, he says, is that differences are bubbling to the surface. This is not new. This is just a kind of the apex, and it is going to get very dark out there. Daniel Gordis, Senior Vice President at Shalom College, joins me now live from Jerusalem. Before we explore a little further the conceit of your argument here, Daniel, I do just want to get your reaction to Lloyd Austin's surprisingly outspoken remarks in Israel today. Thoughts?
Well, I think that many Israelis will actually welcome those remarks. Ambassador Nides made a kind of a much more veiled swipe a few weeks ago. President Biden has hinted that he's not happy with this. But the Israelis who are trying to get Bibi Netanyahu to come down off the tree, so to speak, understand that he will only do so if he can declare some sort of victory, or if he can portray his decision to back away from the judicial reforms as something that was beyond his control. Having an ally and a superpower like the United States making it very clear that they cannot support an Israel that is not a first world democracy is actually of benefit to Netanyahu in helping him back away without enraging his political partners. So it may be a swipe at Netanyahu, but in a certain ironic kind of a way, it's more of a swipe at Netanyahu's political partners for pushing this through. And it may actually in some way help Netanyahu back down, which many people think he actually wants to be able to do.
Our question tonight, is the US relationship with Israel shifting? Given what you have just said, let's just explore a little further the conceit of your argument. And I was fascinated to hear you talk the other day. You talked about profound differences between Israel and the US coming to the surface, bubbling up. You say you're not surprised by this, that there's been some papering over these differences until now. Just explain a little further what you mean by that.
We've always pretended that Israel was kind of a small version of the United States, just in a very different neighborhood. Both were democracies, both had freedom of religion, both had freedom of assembly, and so on and so forth. But the truth of the matter is that the United States and Israel, which are two of the relatively few countries in the world that were founded with an explicit purpose, were founded with very different purposes. Thomas Jefferson was quite explicit that the United States was seen as an experiment in human self-governance that he, Jefferson, hoped would actually one day become a universal model. For a number of decades, it actually looked like that was happening. Francis Fukuyama wrote a book called The End of History, in which he essentially claimed that some sort of liberal democracy and free economy was beginning to be the model across the world. Now, that didn't happen, but that was clearly Jefferson's dream. Israel was never about being a model in human self-governance. Israel was always a country that was created for a much more particularist purpose, not a universal purpose, but a specific purpose related to the Jewish people. The Balfour Declaration that England issued in 1917 said His Majesty's government views with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people. That is not one in the course of human events. And Israel's Declaration of Independence begins, the land of Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people. It's a much more ethnic-centric country, but it has all of the apparatuses of a modern democracy, at least so far. Now, as long as American Jews and American leaders and Israeli leaders at the same time wanted to keep support from both countries going in both directions, it made sense to focus on the ways in which the countries are similar and to kind of, as you said, paper over the ways in which they're different. But over the course of time, the balance, the very delicate dance that Israel has always had to do, being both completely democratic and distinctly devoted to the flourishing of the Jewish people, recognizing that there's 20% of Israeli citizens who are not Jews and they're having full legal rights and so forth. That delicate dance has become more and more difficult to do, especially as Israel's highly nationalist political wing has become more entrenched. And what we're seeing in this government now is that they are completely unabashed about a project that would reduce the rights of minorities, that would make Israel very dissimilar from American democracy. And Bibi Netanyahu actually let them into the chicken coop, so to speak, in order to guarantee his reelection. And contrary to what he expected, he is not able to control them the way that he had assumed that he would.
Yeah, and you have described them as a very different kind of right wing. You've said something that looks a lot like a gang of thugs. Thomas Friedman writing an op-ed in the New York Times today to the point that you've just been making, entitled "American Jews, You Have to Choose Sides on Israel." We've had an op-ed recently by Michael Bloomberg, heavily invested in the sort of high-tech miracle that was Tel Aviv, or has been Tel Aviv, and the Israeli economy, really questioning whether decisions don't need to be made on the US side at this point about the relationship going forward. I was fascinated to hear you suggest that actually, the US position at the moment may just be doing Netanyahu a favor. But should this right-wing government continue, should Netanyahu not take the lifeline, as you've suggested, that to a certain extent the Biden administration is offering him, what happens next, sir?
Well, there are a number of very, very dark scenarios. The best scenario is that the protests continue, that members of Netanyahu's own political party, the Likud, understand that to keep pushing these reforms through is to flirt with very serious danger of violence. And so some sort of compromise is reached, or at least the process is slowed down. And that's what many people who are out there protesting today are calling for. They're calling for what in Hebrew is called hidavrut. They're calling for, slow it down. Let's begin to have a conversation. Let's see where we can talk to. You're just ramming this through, and that's going to explode. Another very dark possibility, as I just suggested, is violence. Israel has a history of political violence. Yitzhak Rabin's assassination in '95 is the most obvious example, but there have been other assassinations as well. And everyone here is very nervous that with last Saturday night, 160,000 people protesting in Tel Aviv, that's the kind of gathering that it is impossible to secure. So it would take only one crazy person on the far left or the far right to do something terrible. And then where this government would go and where this country would go is really very hard to imagine, but it would be to a very bad place. The other dark scenario is that this actually just gets pushed through. And this does become the law. That leads us to a number of different scenarios. We already have pilots and members of special forces saying that they're not going to show up, they're not going to train, they're not going to carry out missions. If the army of this country begins to fall apart, many people have said literally today, that's the end of the country. This is not a country that can survive without its military being highly disciplined and highly responsible. So we're already seeing cracks in the military. It's interesting, of course, that the military here is supporting what people are calling the left. It's not really the left, but people are opposed to in the military to the right-wing government, by and large, not what one has seen in other countries that have taken a turn the authoritarian. But look, the major problem is, let's just imagine that this happens. So the Knesset passes a law which says essentially there's no judicial review. And then the Supreme Court says we actually declare that law essentially unconstitutional. Israel is then in the middle of a huge constitutional crisis where it's not clear who actually controls. How does this play out? Let's say somebody takes a case to the Supreme Court about some action of the military. And the Supreme Court, which often does get asked to rule on these kinds of issues, says the military should or should not do X, Y, or Z. Comes the government in the form of the Minister of the Defense and says, no, the government spoke. And so the Supreme Court has spoken, the government has spoken, the military has said, by and large, that it will follow the court, which would then create a huge constitutional crisis where the parliament has ruled, the military and the court are ignoring the parliament. And where that leads us, really nobody knows. There is absolutely no roadmap for where that takes us.
This is absolutely fascinating. I wonder whether Thomas Friedman is right, whether American Jews have to choose a side on Israel. I leave that open for discussion. At Becky CNN. It's good to have you on, sir. I'm going to have to take a break. It's been a fascinating conversation. Thank you.